Hi, and welcome to the Improvisors Podcast. I'm Kevin James, and this is my co-host, Neil Thomas.
Thank you, Kevin. On the Improvisers Podcast, we talk with improvisers about improvisation and their practices. Who are we in conversation with today, Kevin?
Neil, I'm so pleased to say it's JANETTE HOE. JANETTE spoke about hybridity, layer cakes, the aging dancer, internal choreography, and performance as a way of being and inquiring.
Good morning, JANETTE. We are so thrilled to have you on board with us on the Improvisers Podcast. Welcome, welcome. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, a little nervous, but very well, and very grateful for this opportunity to share some of what I do. Thank you.
Maybe we can start with what drew you to improvisation and movement and dance? How did that come about?
Interestingly, well, I've always wanted to perform or dance. And after a few years here in Australia, I moved back to Malaysia to work in the 90s. And I happened to watch a show called The Butoh Offering, which in hindsight is so relevant for me because, that was life-changing. It was how it all started for me. This show was performed by Lina Ang, who was the founder of Taro Dance Theatre. As soon as I watched her, I was just drawn into this world, and I thought, wow, not only do I want to do this, I want this to be a part of my life. So I approached her and got accepted into the company. And Lina is responsible for bringing Butoh to Malaysia. So it was quite timely that I was back at that time and happened to come across her. So I stayed with Taro Dance Theatre for 5 years, in which at some point Lina left for America, and it was up to us core members to, hold Taro Dance Theatre and carry it forward. So some of us stayed back and, made work and collaborated with different partners as Taro Dance Theatre. But I was also a independent dance artist, but mostly dancing with Taro Dance Theatre. And when I came back to Australia, I sought out similar practitioners, and of course Yumi Umare came up, and I did some training with Yumi and have over the years, and that led me on to Tony Yap, and I'd spent a lot of years training with Tony in what he calls trance dance. And also, well, that I would say Butoh is the the basis of my training, where it all comes from. But I don't necessarily regard myself as a Butoh practitioner. I do use some of what I've learned and also what I'm discovering about my own practice to find my own form. And in between this, I've also had the privilege of learning from Alice Cummins, BMC with Alice Cummins. And that really ties in very strongly with my sensory approach to performance and dance. And I guess Butoh is also really relevant to me in that when translated, Butoh means dance of darkness. I see that darkness as that sense of the unconscious or your subconscious, and in using my sensory language in dance, I feel like in a way that's my body bringing the invisible into the visible world.
Janette, when you mention about somatic practices and Butoh, yes, of course, it feels like you're really sourcing your performative material from your embodied sensing, doing, expressing place. One thing that intrigues me is that in your bio as well, in the way you speak about your work, you speak about choreography and you speak about improvisation. I'd love to know what choreography is for you.
Yeah, when I say choreography, I have to consciously pull myself away from that thought of, oh, it's predetermined movements that I have to follow. For me, really, choreography is done internally. And there are two things. Either I'm in a complete choreographic piece or one that has some structure. And within the structure, there's also choreography involved. I use choreography as a means of also gathering choreographic material. And within that, I'll pull out different signposts for a structured performance, for example. When I get to that signpost, I'm allowed to improvise. In fact, the signposts are just little thematic points for me. Choreography for me is like a language of the language of sensory memory. So I need to be in the environment. The environment is like a partner, a dance partner for me in choreography, where it becomes an impetus. Let's say, if I take this cane as an example, the sound of it becomes immediate. I immediately respond to that sound through a character or through a memory, or I see a cat passing, and that takes me into a different choreographic world. So I guess my choreography is very much in tune with not just my sensory self, but also the environment, my immediate environment that I'm in, whether it's the audience's energy or the things I see or the breeze I feel. That's the language of my dance, I guess.
I had a phrase come to mind, which was it feels like you're in the process, the continual process, the unfolding process of discovering your unique language, your unique way of expressing to the world or being in the world, mixed together. And that you've talked a little bit, and it'd be great to hear a bit more about hybridity. Because it really strikes me that hybridity is at the core somehow of your creative language, or one of the core components, a way of expressing, which is an amalgamation of Butoh, an amalgamation of a particular way that you're present and perform. You are a layer cake.
I am a layer cake, indeed. I'm often grappling with my cultural hybridity, and I use, I guess, my dance projects as a way of unpacking that and understanding my place in the world. Also, I see my dance form or my style as a hybrid of quite a few different forms, because I never really trained formally as a ballet dancer or any of that. So for me, the things that I pick up, like Butoh being the basis of it, other workshops that I've been to could be body mind centering, or even yoga, or other somatic based modalities, like I don't know if I consider Takatina as one of them, but it's not dance related, but there's rhythm in it, which I feel is a part of dance. So all these different modes of engaging with the body and expression is a part of this hybridity that makes up my practice and who I am, and what I'm discovering for myself as well. Is my art form, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll ever come to a point where, oh, okay, this is it, it's the end of it, I know exactly what it is. I think it grows and continues to change as I change.
Janette, watching you perform, I want to use the word global. It feels like you are a fairly globally, I'm going to say, complete performer, because I watch you and you are moving, you form characters, you have often very strong facial expressions, your eyes can be very strongly involved. It's as though your neck and head and your whole body shape is sort of really integrated. So it's as though you pour the whole of your being into your performance. And I see that happening in a very global way. I'm wondering if you can comment on that just a little, that it feels like you aren't limited by a single form, but you inhabit the performative world, bring yourself to it, and use all that you have to generate characters that are often human in form, or more than human in form, or other than human in form. And they're very strong images that I'm left with after watching you perform. So I use the word global because it has such a all-rounded impact for me. I toss it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. That's such an amazing term, and it's, yeah, I feel really honored to be called a globally complete performer. I love using every part of me. It's just the way I language, I guess. And I'm also going into voice as part of my form of expression, as well as dance drawing. For me, it's not enough to dance with just movement alone. I think characters become a part of it. What I see from the outside influences what I feel in myself or my memory. So in response to that, I can't just move. I have to become that character or that voice from, yeah. When I say voice, I mean it as a movement or a thing or creature that comes up. But also, I'm starting to use voice as a way to give this performing body a larger scope of expression. And yeah, and the dance drawing has become a part of this practice for me as well, where I dance and then I draw, and the drawing becomes, that mark making becomes my feedback for choreographic material. It's a cyclical process for me. Yeah, even in my recent residency in Malaysia, where I was dance drawing, watching my own body move as I mark make also has quite a resonance with how I move from that place.
You're drawing with?
Charcoal.
Oh,
Charcoal. And I think metaphor has a big part to play in my work as well. Just like Quila is a big metaphor for me. And charcoal has become a metaphor in this, not just this development, but what it comes across for me is also being at this point in my life where I'm past 50. I feel like there's a lot of thoughts have come up about decay and you know, the impending end of the road of death. Not really end of the road, but a transformation. And charcoal for me feels like that transformation as well. You know, being a burnt item, and it feels like bones when I'm actually touching it and using it. So, you know, that whole thing of being cremated, something being cremated down to dust. So it has those crossovers for me as well, using charcoal. And of course, that informs how I move, how I express after I've done that, after I've done the mark making.
it's also very messy.
It's also very messy, and how it marks the body after that pristine, okay, I've got no marks on me, and all of a sudden I'm this transformed image.
Ephemeral, also to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Very easy to smudge and blur and dissolve and disappear.
And you can't ever erase it to complete nothing. So it's a bit like what marks the body, what marks my life and my being, you know, throughout my journey as a dancer, as I live life. Yeah.
It feels, Janette, that your performance is an inquiry, is an ongoing inquiry, deeply meaningful in a way. It feels like you're exploring your life as well as expressing your life, as well as finding out about your life in the process of being an artist. It's wonderful to hear and to see you. I love it when a moment ago you mentioned about the charcoal and the sort of messiness of it, because so much of your work looks very precise in a way and very clear, clean and beautifully held. So it's such an interesting thing to hear that you spilling out into other places that might be less controlled in that way. But it's more of an observation, but I'm really interested in performance as inquiry and as a way of you discovering meaningfulness in your life.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is the language I use to understand the world, of how I meet the world, of how I communicate. I feel it resonates so much stronger for me than using words alone. In fact, I grapple when it comes to word. Oh, what's that word? I feel very much at ease and with performance as a way to understand not just myself, but others and the world around me. And finding and honing that language that I feel so strongly attached with. Yeah.
Often when I'm watching you perform, I see other worlds, and I have this sense there are spirits in the room. And I wondered if that was a part of your world, the sense of spirits or religious spirits of ancestors. And I wonder if that's something you could talk about.
firstly, thank you. When you say you brought into different worlds, that's a big compliment for me, because that was the beginnings of why I entered this way of, I suppose, Butoh with Lina Ang and entering into her world. But in terms of spirits, maybe I used to see it that way, as spirits, but now I see, perhaps I don't use the word spirit because it's so big and so hard to pinpoint what exactly that means for me. But I see characters, I see worlds, and perhaps that is spirit. I don't know, but these worlds are the things that pull me along into this internal choreography of the stories, of the places that I'm sharing with others in a performance. I like to see them as spirits, but well, I do at times. At some point, at some point in time, I was very strongly resonating with, okay, are these my ancestors speaking to me? But I still feel there's a part of that happens, but I don't necessarily tune into it as my ancestors or my spirit these days. Yeah, which could be an interesting way or portal to re-enter, because yeah, I haven't quite been there in a while. So yeah, I'd like to revisit that actually, now that you've brought it up, Neil.
Janette, each person that we chat with about improvising has their own way of talking about what improvisation is for them within a performance context. But it sounds like that's what you're telling us, that when you use the word choreography, it is maybe scaffolded points in time that you sort of launch from in your explorations, but it feels like the content of your performance is always emergent, and that you're available to whatever is there for you in terms of image or feeling or generating from movement or sound. So it feels like you are telling us about how material emerges for you as a performer, artist, and improviser, I think.
Yeah, you used the word emergence, and you in a previous conversation that we had, you used the word becoming. Yeah, so it is an unfolding of all of that happening. It is a constant, like, walking through this time, space, entering into portals as they emerge, as they come out. Yeah, I guess that kind of sums up improvisation for me and choreography.
Maybe it's a great time to talk about your thoughts on how do you see your relationship to audience during performance?
Okay. My relationship to audience is very important. That without the gaze, sometimes I do get bored improvising on my own. But with the gaze, I feel like I'm working in relationship with something else, to enter into this world that I'd love people to follow me into. And it is important for me how I express or tell the story. what do I mean by that? I feel I need to be very clear in what it is that I'm trying to say at that moment in time. And for me to be clear, I need to follow through with what's telling me, or what's in front of my imagination, I guess. What, you know, the world that I'm in. And I'm very conscious also. I mean, it's a, what do you call it? In and out kind of awareness. I'm very conscious when at times when I'm being followed. Am I saying that right?
It's a mysterious terrain, I think, the relationship between an audience and a performer, how we absorb this energy. It feels like it's a dialogue, and
Yes.
And you know, it's ostensibly one-sided, but it's actually not. Every performer knows how enormously influenced they are by this random crowd that arrives, and their feelings, expectations, and what's going on for them, and that energy that they have somehow really strongly informs what happens. It's a meeting in the middle. So I think language does fall over when we try to articulate that.
It's also a place where I feel very much at home to dialogue in that sense with others. Like I struggle even, you know, right here as we try and speak. I'm trying to find words, but with an audience, I feel like I can drop into it quite easily in conversation.
Because I suppose performance then is your, you know, of course, performance is your language, and it is your language of relationship. It is your language of interaction, and you're bringing yourself forward and you're responding to that which you're meeting in terms of the audience. So I guess it is, as Neil nicely said, it's a dialogue that's always going on in this way. Janette, where next for you? I'm wondering how you choose projects that, you know, as your next project, or where your inclinations arise, or where your enthusiasms come from that keep you moving on to further projects, and what is ahead for you at the moment?
What's at the fore for me is, at this point in time, is my Quila project. It's opened up and continues to open up different trajectories in terms of what it could be. It feels like a PhD research, really, with different topics, different ways of presenting. And it's probably given me a platform to not only deepen my understanding of my art form, but also my life, where I am right now at this stage, and where I can go with it as a aging female dance body. Grappling with the changes, the drastic changes that are sometimes very confronting.
I'm going to actually bring in one more little thing. And I'm just reading here from your bio, her projects invite audiences into visually evocative performance worlds where fragments of memory, lived experiences, and imagination meet. That's not a question, it's confirming something you've written, but confirming, I think, things that we've been speaking of today. but it feels like that world of sort of lived imagination and intention is very strong in your work, and that it's inherent. Would that be reasonable to say?
Yeah, I hope that comes through, because that it feels like that's my practice. That's my, yeah.
It's something we haven't asked again, but I'm intrigued about when you talk about your practice, and what is your practice? Like, is it a daily practice? Do you have to talk a little bit about your practice?
Today, my practice is, I guess I have a morning ritual, which I have to go into stretching and a little bit of meditation. But I'm also at the point where I feel I really would love a group practice with other individuals, like-minded individuals, and I'm slowly finding and gathering to get to that point. I don't necessarily have a regular dance practice, I have to say, but I do have, there are a lot of thoughts that come and go for me. That's part of my practice as well, and where I'm, I guess, reviewing and contemplating where I am. And that drawing comes into it too. It's a bit like art therapy, where it unfolds and reveals in a different way. So that, to me, I feel is a large part of my practice as well, as a dancer performer. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I would call that my practice. And also conversations with other people. That all feeds into what I call my practice. It's not just me as a solo dancer making up different performance pieces. It's actually a very much linked to daily life as well.
Thank you, Janette. How wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, I adored that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for today.
My pleasure. And thanks for inviting me on board with this podcast. It's been very nourishing to do as well, to have that conversation with you both.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about what layer cake brings up for you.
Yeah, right. Okay. Quila is a project that began when I started noticing dramatic changes in my body. As a dancer, that was really confronting. And I've been wanting to put up a piece of work of my own for a long time. So I took this as an opportunity to dive into asking myself a lot of questions and playing that out through dance. So Quila came about as an inquiry into this perimenopausal female dance body. And it's gone through 3 developments so far. The first one being shame. And I worked with Yumi Umare choreographically to pull out stuff from this sometimes unconscious body. And Butoh's the perfect, I suppose, medium for it. And the second one was transition. And I worked at Abbotsford Convent with a filmmaker to create a little video on transitions, and it was also the perfect setting for it. Abbotsford Convent having, lots of history, and the layers on the walls really resonated strongly for me. And I made some photomontages through that work as well, through that time at Abbotsford Convent. I have to also mention that I worked with Ria Somajo and Mindy Ming Wang in the first part. And then in the second part, I used some of what we had created in terms of soundscape and music in the video, and got in Ai Yamamoto, a sound artist, to put it all together musically. So I guess these themes will give you a little bit of snippet into how this has progressed, how this autobiographical work has progressed. But recently, I've just returned from Malaysia on a residency back to my roots to develop part 3. Ria Sumajo, who's a longtime co-creator, collaborator, came along with me. And this time around, the theme belonging was very resonant, the sense of belonging. And what came up strongly for me in this residency was that sense of where home is. Is it here? Is it in Malaysia? But also how that sense of belonging isn't just through blood relations. It was, to the people that I had grown up with, to the people that I had started dance with, to the place, to my extended family being back there as well. So, and it's where grandma made those cakes, and what Quila connected me to this sense of being held when we were little, and these cakes were something that we had at our family gatherings. So I was always in that environment where, that I sit so comfortably into this place called home and belonging. So that's what Quila is and continues to be for me, this project. It's still growing, and I'm hoping to create what Ria and I had come up with in Malaysia, back in Melbourne, within a year, hopefully. you.